Net neutrality has another chance to be resurrected from the dead. Its latest fight to survive is now in the courtroom. Net neutrality can be a messy topic, but here to help us digest what matters in this latest chapter of the saga is CNET senior writer Maggie Reardon. Thanks for joining us.
I'm glad to be here.
All right, so right now in the court, there's two different sides going on. On one side, you have Mozilla, a bunch of internet companies, state attorneys generals, trying to fight to keep net neutrality going.
Yes, so basically they are fighting against the FCC's repeal of the rules, which they did back in 2017. So they're saying they have a bunch of arguments, but one of the arguments is that the FCC really didn't have any right to repeal these rules, and then like the attorneys generals are actually picking apart the aspect of the repeal that says that that the FCC preempts any states from passing their own rules. This is the DC Circuit of the Court of Appeals. So basically this is like the appellate system is like right under the US Supreme Court. So
right. And there were 3 judges today who heard nearly 5 hours of arguments.
This is unusual for oral arguments, even like in an appellate court. Like they don't usually go on for 5 hours. So I think everybody was just kind of like, oh my God, I got to go to the bathroom. I got to eat something. Like, I mean, even the justices were kind of like, this is long. Let's like speed this up and get through this. But it's a very dense topic, and there was a lot to cover, and there were a lot of arguments to go through.
This is the kind of situation where there was like a clear winner, or what are you hearing?
Well, I guess sort of the biggest takeaway is more uncertainty. Like we really don't know how this is going to come down, and that's true of most like appeals court decisions, because really like the oral arguments are just like one aspect of this whole case. And what the justices sort of focus on is a little bit telling, but it doesn't tell the whole story. There are some other procedural challenges that were made as part of this, right? And so those might be the arguments that end up kind of winning the day. And so net neutrality could sort of be saved on a technicality. And we can kind of go into some of those.
Yeah.
And yeah, so like one of the issues was this issue of public safety. So part of the complaint was that during some of these crazy wildfires that were happening in California, the Santa Clara firefighters, their service was throttled by Verizon. Mm-hmm. Now they admit that like that by itself isn't really a net neutrality violation, right? Like they had a service contract with Verizon. Verizon could just like they can for me, I have unlimited service. If I use too much, they can like throttle me back, right? That's not a net neutrality issue per se. But what they were saying is, now the FCC has basically, as part of its repeal of net neutrality, like they've abdicated authority for everything.
Because they went hands-off approach.
They're like, not my job. It's the Federal Trade Commission's job. So Federal Trade Commission, you deal with it. But what the public safety community is saying is like, well, but what about us? Like you didn't even like consider our concerns that maybe there should be some sort of exception for public safety. And there were a lot of comments in the record, and that was something that Judge Millett really sort of hammered in on and was asking the FCC, like, I mean, like, did you consider this? I mean, and they didn't really have a very good answer for that. So that could be an area where the court says like, well, at least you should have like considered it, like show us your work here. Like,
so because they did it, that could have been a technicality.
That could have been a technicality, right. And then the other big area is, so the FCC repealed like most of the net neutrality rules. The one thing they kept is this notion of the transparency rule.
Right, that's the idea that you gotta spell it out.
Right, you just gotta tell me, right? You gotta tell the consumer if you're gonna favor Hulu over Netflix. The FCC has to cite like what authority it has to do anything, right? So they cite this part of the act, this sort of little minor part that actually Congress changed. So like the FCC adopted its rule in 2017, they cited the section of the act as their authority for the transparency rule in December. Then in the spring, Congress updated the act. They actually, took out a little subsection and rewrote the language. And then the rules actually officially came off the books in June.
So they were basing this off a rule that now no longer is there.
Exactly. Okay. Right. Now the FCC argues, but it still gives us authority. But what Judge Millett sort of really seemed to hone in on is, but you didn't stop and give the public a chance to comment whether or not they thought that this changed your analysis here. Right. And that's something, that's a procedural thing. The FCC, there was something that was significant that changed from the time they adopted the rule until it went into effect. Congress made a change to the law that they were basing it on, and they didn't stop to consider whether or not they still had the authority. And that could be the technicality that, kind of makes the whole thing crumble.
So where do we sit now after 5 hours of these arguments?
Now we sit and wait.
Okay.
We wait for 4 to 6 months.
Thanks, Maggie, and thanks for watching. That's it for now.